Dear students, in this module, we will discuss and comprehend the Big Push theory and how they evolved this theory, especially as a concept in development economics or welfare economics. It is usually discussed this Big Push model. The theory says that a certain minimum amount of resources must be allocated for developmental programs for their successful achievement before it can take off. To use an analogy, the Big Push model is like minimum speed that is required for an aircraft to take off. This theory will be briefly elaborated in this module. Let's begin with the definition. The Big Push model is a concept in development economics or welfare economics. It is used as an analogy. The Big Push model is like minimum speed that needed for an aircraft to take off. Paul Narcissus Ronstein Rodan, during the period of 1902 to 1985, he was an economist of Jewish origin, born in Krakow, Poland, and trained in the Austrian tradition under famous economist Hans Mayer FR in Vienna. He postulated a theory which is known as the Big Push theory. According to the Big Push theory, a big push in the form of comprehensive investments can be helpful in bringing about economic development, or in other words, a certain minimum amount of resources must be allocated for developmental programs for their successful achievement before it can leave the ground or it can take off. Similarly, a critical amount of resources is necessary for developmental activities. Piecemeal allocation and nominal deployment of funds will not help a country's economy to move forward. Rather, a specified minimum amount is considered as something necessary for economic development to be set in motion. Ronstein Rodan presents three types of indivisibilities and the economics of scale, that is, decrease in product cost with increase in production. They are: number 1, indivisibility of production function; 2, indivisibility in demand; and 3, indivisibility in supply of saving, that is, negative correlation between interest and saving. The meaning of indivisibilities in economics is that the production methods that incur high fixed costs in order to produce the first unit of goods may not be divisible below the economies of scale they need to achieve in order to produce the goods which would make those methods unavailable to smaller producers. Some commodities may be indivisible if their minimum size or quantities make them unavailable to consumers. Economics of scale that arises because of the inverse relationship between the quantity produced and per unit fixed cost. These indivisibilities in production function, let us discuss about this. Indivisibility of production function refers to the indivisibility of input, output, and production process, and so on. These indivisibilities lead to increasing returns, that is, increase in output, income, and employment. An important example this type of indivisibility is social overhead capital. Let's discuss about social overhead capital. Social overhead capital includes production of power, transport, communication, and public utility services with heavy investments in directly productive activities. Their installation requires a sizable initial investment, but As time passes, better utilization brings down cost and makes them profitable. Social overhead capital or indivisibles like power, transport, communication and public utility services must be provided before setting up directly productive industries. They require substantial amounts of capital. These assets last very long. They are fundamental to development and require appropriate levels of investment. Isolated investments and facilities will not yield any benefits. The other aspect that requires our discussion is on indivisibility of demand. Rodin's central idea is that underdeveloped countries have small-sized markets due to low per capita income and purchasing power of the majority of the people. This can be addressed by expanding the size of market and development of the complementary industries. The third aspect is about indivisibility in supply of savings. Substantial investments in a number of industries at the same time require a very high level of savings, which is very difficult to achieve in a developing country. The solution to this is, when income increases due to increase in investment mechanisms, this must raise the marginal rate of savings in comparison to average rate of savings. In other words, when income is increased, the marginal rate of savings should also increase more than the average savings. There are specific criticisms of the big push theory. That is, the theory does not explain quantum of minimum investment. It also does not consider the fact that the capacity to invest is extremely limited or even absent among developing countries. The other criticism is that the theory does not discuss specific steps to overcome bottlenecks. Rodin does not give importance to the private-public participation in the model. Similarly, Rodin does not seem to have regarded the role and impact of technology as a significant component. It failed to recognize that the amount of resources in developing countries is limited. The other criticism is that the big push perspective is heavily oriented to industrialization and seems to have ignored agriculture. The other criticism is that there is an overemphasis on indivisibility. In addition to that, it is also specified that there is a danger of inflation which can derail the economy of the country. Then this theory cannot be adopted and implemented without active state participation, guidance and control. In developing countries, government is usually ineffective, inefficient and lethargic. As noted elsewhere, the theory has not been validated by experience. For example, in Bolivia, where large investments have been made on social overheads, the economy remained stagnant and per capita income remained low. So, in conclusion, we can mention that the big push theory explains that in any country there should be a initial heavy investment to boost up the economy, so that after crossing that threshold the economy can sustain, and so that the development can start showing its visible results. However, as we have noticed that there are a lot of criticisms, especially its applicability in developing countries where such a big push, given the low level of purchasing capacity of the people and the governance issues that are there, will not be possible to the extent that is expected through this theory. That is why one of the major criticisms about this theory is that its applicability is very limited and also can be questionable in the circumstances that has been listed. Dear students, in this module, we will discuss and comprehend the Lebensstein's critical minimum effort thesis. The theory is based upon the interrelationship among three factors: namely per capita income, population growth, and investment. The thesis says that the rise in per capita income to critical minimum level is needed for the population growth rate to decrease. This theory will be elaborated in detail here. The Lebenstin's critical minimum effort thesis. Harvey Lebenstin, during the period between 1922 to 1994, he was an Ukrainian-born Jewish economist. His major and most important contributions to economic theory are the concept of X-efficiency. X-efficiency is the effectiveness with which a given set of inputs are used to produce outputs, and critical minimum effort thesis is mainly in the focus in the development economics. The central theme of Professor Lebenstin's theory is that overpopulated or underdeveloped countries are characterized by the vicious circle of poverty, other growing deterring problems which keep in a state of perennial backwardness. These countries need to increase their per capita income to a certain level where they can maintain a self-sustained growth rate. Lebenstin's theory says that a critical minimum effort, that is investment above a minimum level, is necessary to overcome all the obstacles of the underdeveloped countries. There are certain merits of Lebenstin's critical minimum effort thesis. The Lebenstin's theory takes a more realistic view of the problem of poverty and economic growth. It provides the basis for a program of massive industrialization and is closer to the third state in the economic growth model as postulated by the American economist Whitman Rostow in 1960. Let us see what this means. Before discussing Lebenstin theory, it is necessary to understand Rostow's takeoff stage. Rostow's stages of economic growth model is one of the major models of economic growth. The model describes that economic growth occurs in 5 essential stages of varying lengths, namely traditional society, preconditions for takeoff, takeoff state, drive to maturity stage, and age of high mass consumption state. Rostow's third state is the crucial stage, lasting a relatively brief period of 2 to 3 decades in which the economy transforms itself in such a way that after this stage, economic growth takes place more or less automatically. The takeoff is defined as the interval during which the rate of investment increases in such a way that real output per capita rises, and this initial increase carries with it radical changes in the techniques of production and the disposition of income flows, which perpetuate the new scale of investment and perpetuate theory, thereby the rising trend in the per capita output. There are certain criticisms of Lebenstin's critical minimum effort thesis. That's basically, the theory is based upon the interrelationship among 3 factors, namely per capita income, population growth, and investment. Population growth rate related to death rate. Lebenstin is of the view that population increases as the income rises up to a specific level. The population declines beyond a certain level of investment. This implies that the rise in income is directly related to the growth in population, which besides per capita income is also affected by social attitudes, customs, and traditions of the people. For example, in India, the death rate declined from 23 deaths per thousand population in 1951 to 52 to 8 deaths in 2000 to 2001. This decrease is not due to decrease in the per capita income. It was greatly influenced by other factors also, such as immunization, control of communicable diseases, and so on. The other criticism is about the decline in birth rate is not due to increase in per capita income. Lebenstin explains that the decrease in birth rate cannot be attributed to an increase in the per capita income up to a critical minimum level. To decrease the birth rate in a developing country calls for change in the attitude, better understanding, education, institutional changes, and people's perceptions. Therefore, it can be said for certain that a decline in the birth rate would lead to decline in population and increase in per capita income. In effect, we acknowledge that the issues of birth rate in such countries are not a purely economic one. Indeed, it is mostly of a social, cultural nature. The other third criticism is about the neglects of the time element. The critical minimum effort thesis provides a set of timeless, functional relationship rather than time series of growth in population and income. Hallam Mint, a Burmese economist and one of the pioneers of development economics, remarks that it is not logical to call critical minimum efforts as a magic wand. The fourth criticism is about the theory ignores the role of the state. The thesis says that the population growth has not been checked by the state. The government cannot wait for the per capita income to rise above critical minimum level so that the population growth will automatically decrease. This is because if the country waits for the per capita income to rise above critical minimum level to automatically decrease the population growth, by then the country may reach the stage of population explosion. In fact, Liebenstein has not accounted for the possibility of state undertaking family planning programs for bringing down the rate of growth of population. Thus, it is difficult to believe that population will decrease if the per capita income rises above a certain level. Thus, it is a very dubious hypothesis. The fifth criticism is that the thesis focuses on the influence of external forces. Experience shows that the initial stage of development in underdeveloped countries is affected by external forces. However, this thesis fails to consider the role of external forces like foreign capital, foreign trade, the state of international economics. These forces have deeper impact on development and are considered as integral to development. The sixth criticism is about higher than 3% growth rate cannot ensure endless expansion. Another defect of the thesis is that when the maximum growth rate of population is 3% and the growth of national income exceeds the population growth rate, this situation cannot ensure endless economic expansion. Professor Hallam Mint said that any country which experiencing a high population growth and an increase in national income that exceeds the population growth will not have a sustained economic expansion for a long time. If the growth rate of national income is higher than the population growth rate, there is no guarantee of endless expansion or sustained economic growth. The seventh criticism is about complex relation between per capita income and growth rate. According to Professor Mint, the functional relationship between the level of per capita income and the rate of growth in total income is very complex. The relation of per capita income with rate of saving and investment depends on the distributional pattern of income and the effectiveness of financial institutions in mobilizing savings. The eighth criticism is about the unsatisfactory explanation of stimulants and shocks. Liebenstein's theory is based on the assumption that if per capita income is below the critical minimum level, the economy will revert to the position of equilibrium. If the per capita income is less than critical minimum, this does not mean that economy will slide back to the position of the earlier static equilibrium. It is possible that an increase in per capita income may increase the capital stocks and skills. It is also expected that if we take time into consideration, then there is every possibility that after a regular interval of time, the economy may stay at higher and higher point of equilibrium. In this regard, as a conclusion, we can say that the Liebenstein's equilibrium theory has clearly brought out very important relationships that exist in how the thesis has based on the relationship among three factors, that is the per capita income, population growth and investment, so that the critical minimum effort is required among these three components, and the theory has immensely contributed in understanding in detail the relationship of these three factors and how the population is one of the important component in explaining the one side, the per capita income, the other side of the investment, and that way the relationship is well documented. However, given the criticisms that are there, these views of these points have to be taken into consideration when the theory is to be explained as one of the theories in the population. No doubt, this is one of the sophisticated theories in population, as it has contributed immensely in understanding how the population and investment are to be viewed in terms of the linkages, but at the same time, the population growth related to factors like death rate, the decline in birth rate that is not due to increase in per capita income, and the neglects of the time element, the theory ignores the role of the state and the influence of external forces, the factors like higher than the 3% growth rate that cannot ensure endless expansion, the complex relation between per capita income and growth rate, the unsatisfactory explanation of stimulants and shocks are some of the possible criticisms that have emerged at the end of the explanation for this theory, which definitely made an important way of seeing analytically and to see how best these can be addressed for its applicability in linking in the investment one side and population. No doubt, this theory has contributed in understanding the way in which the investment takes place and how the population responds to such situations. However, the criticisms that have been laid down are very important to understand what are the exceptions that exist when we are understanding the interrelationships among these three factors, which is very vividly explained by this theory of Levenshtein's theory.